Welcome to the next lesson in living in an imperfect world. Today we're going to be talking about how to respond to ruptured relationships. Let me start out by reading 1 Samuel chapter 19, verses 9 and 10. The Bible says this, "And the evil spirit from the Lord was upon Saul, as he sat in his house with his javelin in his hand, and David played with his hand. And Saul sought to smite David even to the wall with the javelin. But he slipped away out of Saul's presence, and he smote the javelin into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night." Keep this in mind. Think about this. David didn't do anything to attack Saul. He didn't speak of him critically. He wasn't disloyal. He never used the goodwill of the nation to advance his claim to the throne of Israel. But he did always honor Saul's position. David even refused to harm Saul when he had the opportunity. In spite of that, the relationship between Saul and David was damaged beyond repair. In his jealousy and rebellion against God, Saul attempted to kill David with a javelin at least twice. All of us have people who used to be our friends, but now they're not. Maybe they're angry over a money issue. Maybe a business deal went wrong. Maybe there was a real or even imagined offense years ago. Now that relationship is broken. So I know some people who won't even attend family functions if they find out that certain other relatives are going to be there. Their attitude is this: I'll never face or speak to or be with that person ever again. Why does that happen? Why do lifelong friends stop speaking? Why will family members not be in the same room? And what should we do when that happens? From the story of David and Saul, we can draw some principles that are going to help us properly respond to ruptured relationships. Now, the three basic roots of ruptured relationships. Number one is this: some relationships are broken by sin. You see, sin destroyed Saul and David's relationship. 1 Samuel 18 tells of the women of Israel singing the praises of Israel's greatest warriors. When those women praised David for more than Saul had, jealousy began to grow in Saul's heart. And he had enjoyed the part of the song about his slaying thousands, but when they sang that David had slain 10,000s, he became angry. The sin of jealousy often breaks relationships. David didn't write the music the women were singing. He wasn't campaigning to replace Saul. But Saul, feeling insecure, was worried about maintaining his power and prestige and place in the kingdom. So he assumed that David was out to take the throne from him. It bothered him to see anybody else receiving praise. He wanted it all for himself. The Bible says Saul eyed David from that day and forward. The green-eyed monster of jealousy inhabited his mind and spirit. Every word of praise or favorable comment about David and every good thing that David did made Saul more unhappy. Sin had destroyed what had once been a good relationship. Some relationships are broken by a stand. Acts chapter 15 is the story of Paul and Barnabas' disagreement over whether to take Mark on their second missionary trip. They were ready to go back and visit the churches they had planted, and Paul and Barnabas had a great relationship. But Barnabas had played a key role in seeing that Paul was accepted by the church after his salvation. They had worked together in the church at Antioch, and they had seen great victories on their first missions trip. Barnabas wanted John Mark on that second trip, but Paul didn't want him because Mark had left them on the first one. The contention between Paul and Barnabas was so great that they couldn't work together anymore. I believe we can make a case that either one of them was completely right. Barnabas made a decision to take Mark without considering how Paul felt about it. And Paul was adamantly against taking Mark, refusing to consider that Mark might have grown. Each of them thought he was right and the other was wrong. Neither one of them was willing to give in. So because of their stand on an issue that probably could have been resolved, the first great missionary partnership that had been so marvelously effective was now broken. If a relationship is broken because you take a stand on an issue important enough to draw a firm line on, then be willing to do that. Don't regret if what you did caused a broken relationship, if the issue warranted taking a firm stand. The third one, some relationships are broken by sanctification. Sometimes in a relationship, one person may grow so much spiritually that the other person doesn't enjoy being around that person anymore. The two may no longer have the same interest. They no longer want to talk about the same things. They don't have enough in common to maintain the friendship. It's not a whole lot of fun to spend time with someone who doesn't enjoy the same things you enjoy. So it's possible that as you become closer to the Lord, some relationships that used to be close may fall by the wayside. Now, that doesn't mean you act like a Pharisee and look down on them. It's just a natural consequence of becoming more like Jesus in your Christian life. The response to ruptured relationships is, first of all, we need to see the preservation to speak. Don't be the one to sever the relationship if you can help it. Repeatedly, Saul tried to kill David, but David refused to respond in kind. In fact, when he became king, David looked for someone in the family of Saul that he could show kindness to. He was not willing to sever that relationship despite all the problems he had experienced. Do everything possible to make it easy for people to come back into relationship with you. Have you ever heard a teenager ever talk about breaking up? Now look, I don't believe teenagers should be going together and a boyfriend and girlfriend in the first place. But if they do start dating and then break up, almost always each person will tell you that he or she broke off the relationship. Something in our pride and in our ego makes us want to be the one who ends a relationship. But God doesn't want it that way. David did all that he could for as long as he could to maintain a good relationship with Saul. There's a process that we need to follow. Go through the Bible process before the relationship is severed. You have two right choices when someone wrongs you. Number one, choose not to take offense. Some people are really good at causing offense, but we have the option of not getting offended. If you choose not to take offense, then you don't go around telling everybody about what the other person said or did. To do that shows that you have taken offense. We talk about anything that bothers us. The second right choice is do everything you can to resolve the problem and restore that relationship. That responsibility is ours no matter where the problem lies. So many times we adopt an attitude that we're going to wait until the other person comes to us. But it's our job to do everything we can if we follow the Bible process to make things right. This is so important that Jesus said we are to leave our gift at the altar rather than try to worship with a ruptured relationship that's been unresolved. The Bible process for trying to resolve a problem is found in Matthew chapter 18. We're to start by going to the person alone. We don't go around telling others about the problem. If going alone doesn't work, then we try again with other mature Christians. The point is, we do our best to try and resolve the problem. Number 3, there's a prophet to remember. David benefited greatly by his relationship with Saul. Because of Saul, David got to kill Goliath. Because of Saul, David met Jonathan. By watching Saul, David had the opportunity to observe and learn how to govern a nation. There were good things that David could focus on. Focusing on the good that a relationship has produced is not just for the relationships that are damaged beyond repair. It helps overcome the differences that everybody has from time to time. This kind of attitude helps keep a healthy relationship. Don't allow yourself to become bitter towards those who have helped you in the past. Even if things change and you can no longer be close to them, don't hate them or wish evil against them. It doesn't help the cause of Christ if their lives are damaged. There are also parties that need to be spared. Don't involve innocent parties in the dispute. We see this clearly demonstrated in the story of David and Saul. Jonathan was both Saul's son and David's best friend. David didn't try to get him to rebel against his father. Jonathan warned David of the danger David was in, but he stayed with his dad. He remained both a good son and a good friend. Good people will allow you the room to make your own decision. Manipulative and controlling people will try to force you to decide in their favor. When you're involved in disagreement or a dispute, work at keeping it between you and the other person only. I see this issue frequently with divorced couples. The tendency is to play tug of war with the kids. Don't drag your children into a fight with your spouse. Parents talk about how bad the other partner is and give the kids more whipped cream on the hot fudge sundae. Those kind of actions of trying to bribe your kids and tear down the other person, those kind of actions are not only ungodly, but they're going to hurt your children. There's also a position to respect. Respect the position even when you cannot respect the person. Saul was not worthy of respect because of his behavior. He was selfish and jealous. He devoted an incredible amount of resources in trying to find David to kill him, but Saul was still the king. In 1 Samuel 26, we see what David did when he had the opportunity to take revenge for all that Saul had done to him. Abishai wanted to kill Saul. David said, "Destroy him not, for who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?" Why didn't David allow Abishai to kill Saul? It wasn't because he was afraid of Saul, not because he loved Saul, not because he was wrong and Saul was right. It was because Saul was anointed of God. David realized that God had put Saul on the throne, and it was not his place to take him off that throne. I don't believe David respected Saul, but he did respect his position. If your dispute involves someone in a leadership position, pray for him and ask God to guide him. When you talk to him or you talk about him, do so with respect for the position that he holds. There's also a precaution to heed. Be careful whose advice you listen to. When you're involved in a ruptured relationship, there are almost always, people like Abishai around who will advise you to get even. This seems to be especially true when the relationship involves someone in authority. Anyone who tried to get you to turn against God, God-ordained authority in your life, is not your friend. Those people are so quick to offer you their advice, and they're usually not around to pick up the pieces after the explosion comes from following it. Make sure that the ones giving you advice are godly people who are using the Bible. Be very careful about whose advice you take about ruptured relationships. There are also priorities to maintain. Don't overestimate the importance of any relationship. It's wrong to be ungrateful to people who have helped you, but you have to realize that the relationship you're struggling with is not the source of your supply. Many get so deeply committed to a person or a movement that they can't stand alone on their own. If that person or that movement fails, they go down too. One great danger lifeguards are warned about is that it's posed by a drowning person. In his panic and terror, it's not uncommon for the one drowning to pull the rescuing person under and drown both of them. Many allow themselves to be pulled under when someone else goes down. Don't let another's problem become your problem. The relationship you're struggling with is not vital. People are important, but only God is necessary. David didn't need Saul. God was able to place David on the throne in his own time without anybody else's help. You see, no one can keep you from the will of God except you. Others can hurt you. They can make you sad. They can discourage you. They can even be a bump in the road. They can cause you discomfort, but they cannot keep you from God's will unless you let them. Some don't go to church because another person mistreated them, offended them, or maybe I did them wrong. My question is this: so what? By that, I don't mean who cares. I'm sorry for that hurt. But what does that have to do with their relationship to God? Who does that keep from reading their Bible? What does that have to do with their serving God? If you allow the failure of a relationship to take you away from God, you place too high a value on that relationship. Now let's talk about restoring ruptured relationships. There are two crucial steps you can take as you strive to restore broken relationships. Number one, seek out the possibility of reconciliation. You always ought to want things to be made right if it's at all possible. With everything in us, we ought to work towards reconciliation. Deal with the problem in such a way that you're leaving the door open and you're building a bridge for people to come back. I don't like it when people leave my church. But whether or not I think they have a valid reason for leaving, no one leaves the church because I kicked them out. Why not? First, because I need to stay right with God myself. And second, I want to do everything I can to make sure they don't turn away from God because of the way they've been treated. And third, they often come back. I've seen people come back to a church that never would have happened if the door was not left open. The truth is, much of the time, relationships that could be restored are not restored. We either don't want restoration or we at least tell ourselves that we don't. Too often we allow pride and hurt feelings to keep us from doing what we know we should do to make things right. A ruptured relationship will never be restored unless we really want things to be made better. Here's the second truth. Stay on the path of reconciliation. When a relationship has been ruptured, put yourself in a position that makes it easy for the other person to come back. Make sure your actions convey the message that reconciliation is welcome. Help the other person if you have the opportunity. Look for ways to be their friend. Be kind to them. Keep praying for them. When someone leaves our church, I don't take them off my prayer list until I know for sure I don't have a single twinge of hard feelings towards that person. When I truly want God to bless him, I know my attitude towards that person is what it should be. Following these steps will help restore broken relationships that come to us all at times. When you're faced with a ruptured relationship, the pattern to follow is David's behavior in his relationship with Saul.